Hello and welcome to On the Safe Side, a monthly podcast hosted by the editors of Safety and Health magazine, the official magazine of the National Safety Council. This is Barry Botino, associate editor at Safety and Health, and with me this month, as always, are my trusty fellow associate editors, Kevin Drewley and Alan Ferguson. Hello, fellas.
Hey, Barry.
Hi there, Barry.
Well, we're thankful that you've joined us for this March 2026 episode, which is number 73 in our history. This month's episode is sponsored by Magid. Many of you out there have had a unique journey into safety, and we'd like to hear all about it for our My Story feature in the magazine. You can submit a personal story or encourage a safety colleague to do so by emailing us at safehealth@nsc.org. In this month's episode, we'll examine some highlights from the March issue of Safety and Health, and Nancy Tippins, who is the principal of the Nancy T. Tippins Group, will join us to discuss generational differences in the workplace. Nancy was the chair of an expert committee that conducted research on the topic and has some unique insights. Finally, we'll share some stories that you may have missed in our In Case You Missed It segment. Is everybody ready? Well, here we go.
In a compelling feature story, Kevin explores workers who think, learn, and process information in different ways, which is often known as neurodiversity. An estimated 17% of workers have some form of neurodiversity, according to a study quoted in the story. One source says that accommodating employees, quote, begins with employers embracing a more flexible, individual approach to work design, and that can be accomplished in many of the same ways that aid in workplace safety. Among the recommendations for neurodiverse workers mentioned in the story, simple plain language summaries of procedures chunked into short steps, voice-based entry into forms, voice-based interaction for hazard and incident reporting, closed captioning at meetings or events, and the option to dim or adjust lighting in work environments. Another source states that the most important questions that you can ask are, how can I support you? What can I do to support you? And what do you need? And then there's working together to, quote, navigate that and put the supports in place. And that in itself creates a culture of safety and support where everyone feels valued for what they have to offer the organization. And it doesn't matter how it gets done, it's done in a way that is valued. The article also asks safety pros or workers to share their stories. Do you have examples of what your workplace or industry has done to accommodate workers with neurodivergence? Or are you a person with a neurodivergence who has asked for or created accommodations or coping strategies at work? Please let us know by emailing us at safehealth@nsc.org to tell us about it. The March issue also features a story on common head protection mistakes from yours truly. Among those common mistakes are using the wrong type of head protection, not wearing it correctly, and failing to replace head protection after an impact. If that's not enough, there's also a brief sidebar on helmet stickers and their safety considerations. Finally, how much do you know about regulations? The March issue includes a quiz to test your knowledge or help you learn something new. This issue also features news, information about new products, and more, which you can find in print or at safetyandhealthmagazine.com.
Experience superior breathable comfort and dexterity with Magid's ultra-thin 21-gauge impact glove, the TRX 463. Magid is taking comfort to the next level with the 21G Max impact glove. An ultra-thin 21-gauge construction, combined with a specially engineered fiber blend, provides the thinnest, most comfortable cut-resistant glove on the market. Revolutionary M-Flex Plus defense system back-of-hand protection offers superior breathability, promoting exceptional comfort and worker compliance. As your true partner in safety, Magid's mission is to provide expertise and revolutionary innovations in PPE that help you keep your workers safe. Magid, since 1946, fourth generation and family owned. Safety isn't just a job, it's our legacy. Visit magidglove.com to learn more.
Focusing on the individual situations and needs of workers, regardless of what generation they're part of, can benefit both safety and communication in the workplace. That's according to a report from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Joining us this month on the safe side is Nancy Tippins, principal of the Nancy T. Tippins Group. Nancy served as the chair of a committee of experts who researched generational differences at work for that published national report and is here to talk about those findings. Welcome, Nancy, and thank you for being with us on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, Nancy, we've all heard about differences between generations, but what are some of the biggest commonalities with multiple generations in the same workforce?
Our committee was asked to evaluate the meaningfulness of generational categories in workforce management. We reviewed hundreds of research papers and learned that studying generations is very difficult because it's hard to separate out age effects, period effects, and cohort effects. Age effects are those things that are due to biological factors or maturations or events, any event that's highly correlated with age. So, for example, it might be having children or it might be reaching retirement age. Period effects are those things that affect most people during a period of time. So, for example, we have a whole lot of young people that are very adept at using a cell phone because cell phones became common during a certain period of time when these people were in their formative years. Cohort effects reflect changes in society that affect a group of people, such as the Great Depression. It affected a lot of people when they were developing, starting their careers. Differences across people certainly exist. There are differences in the opportunities within an age group. For example, some of us have college degrees and some of us don't. There may well be differences in the choices that we make at different ages. What people do in their 60s compared to what people do in their 20s may vary because of factors like physical abilities or opportunities that accrue over working years. So, for example, 65-year-olds may gravitate away from physical demanding jobs simply because they're less able to do them than they were in their youth. And you might find older workers rather than younger workers in managerial jobs simply because those older workers have had experiences that are needed to lead effectively. You might also find that younger workers are more adept at some types of technology simply because they have had more exposure to that technology. When you look within an occupation, you often find more similarities than differences. So, for example, if you looked at civil engineers, you would see a lot of similarities, certainly in education and in interest, but you might also see similarities in values and preferences for work environments within that group than if you were comparing them to another occupation, such as sales. In other words, a 50-year-old engineer may have more in common with a 25-year-old engineer than he or she would have with a 50-year-old worker who works on the assembly line. All in all, individuals from the same generation are just as likely to be different from one another as they are from individuals from different generations. In our committee, we concluded that rather than relying on generations to define the best approach to workforce management, a better approach was to focus on the needs of individual workers in their work environment. In other words, organizations need to make an assessment of needs based on the work environment, the job requirements, and the available human capital.
On that same vein, Nancy, in your work leading that committee, the report suggested not using labels such as baby boomer or millennial to talk about different generations. How does not using those terms benefit safety?
From a safety perspective, it is critical that the organization define what practices are necessary to protect workers and property. Safety requirements do not apply to workers of a certain age. They apply to everyone performing the job. If PPE is required, everyone must use it. You don't say that only young people need to wear safety glasses. Everyone must wear safety glasses in certain areas of the work environment. Not using those labels forces the employer to consider carefully what safety practices are necessary, and it enables the organization to protect everyone, not just a subset of workers.
Communicating safety messages can look different in various organizations. How can employers ensure all workers are receiving those messages?
If you want to make sure the right people are receiving the safety messages, it is incumbent upon you, the employer, to define the audience, understand what the audience needs to know, and communicate messages in a manner that is accessible to that audience. So, for example, if you have a multilingual group of employees, You will have to communicate in the relevant languages. If you have a group of employees that does not read well, you're going to have to communicate orally rather than in writing, or perhaps communicate with pictures. A systematic approach to messaging will allow you to define the message and determine the most effective way to communicate it. I'll just add here too that it's important to evaluate the extent to which the message is received and make whatever tweaks are necessary. Safety is too important not to ensure that the message is received and understood.
Nancy, what adjustments need to be made when it comes to training different generations?
I argue that there's no need to distinguish generations when it comes to safety training. Instead, the employer has to look at the job requirements and conduct a training needs analysis. That means determining what tasks and duties are performed by the incumbents in the job, what safety behaviors are required, and what knowledge, skills, and abilities are necessary to perform those tasks and duties. Then you have to determine how are those KSAs, knowledge, skills, abilities, going to be acquired. Are those something the employee brings to the job when he or she is hired? Or is the organization going to teach the individual? An organization might expect an accountant to come into the organization with education in accounting and perhaps a certified public accountant certification. In contrast, another organization might teach workers how to operate a specific piece of heavy equipment. Remember that the job defines the requirements, and you need a systematic process to determine what those requirements are.
As we finish up today, Nancy, what other takeaways from your research on different generations working together can benefit safety professionals?
First, I would add that organizations need to put in place a process to constantly evaluate safety needs. It's not one and done. Work changes, the capabilities of new employees change, and the attitudes and expectations of existing employees change. You will need to reevaluate the safety procedures and the messages around them on a regular basis. Second, I would say to you that tailoring policies and practices to a specific group of employees defined by some personal characteristic is unlikely to meet the needs of all members of that group and may exclude others unfairly. If you focus only on the needs of the younger members of your workforce in developing your safety program, you may ignore the needs of older workers. Third, be skeptical of any stereotypes that apply to large numbers of people. They rarely apply to all people, and safety is too important to leave someone out.
Well, Nancy, we're really grateful for your time this month on the Safe Side. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for sharing your insights.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
The month of March features the annual celebration of St. Patrick's Day, and with any luck, you won't have missed all the news from around the safety world. Just in case you happen to overlook something during your busy days, we're here for you with 3 stories that you need to know. And I'll start. In case you missed it, OSHA has received its full budget, or I guess for the rest of the fiscal year, which runs until September 30th. Essentially, the agency received about the same money that they got in fiscal year 2025. And they received through this bill or law now $629.3 million, which is just slightly less than the $632.3 million they got in FY 2025. And now about $243 million of that will go toward federal enforcement, and around $120 million will go to state programs. Some big news from that is the Susan Harwood Training Grant Program is intact, and it will receive about $12.8 million. This administration, over about 5 budgets, has tried to cut that program each time, but Congress has not followed suit. And the White House had requested about $582.4 million for OSHA, and that's kind of the same with the House had also put forth the House Appropriations Committee. The Senate Appropriations Committee, meanwhile, wanted to give the agency the same funding it got in FY 2025, which was, of course, is $632.3 million. In more news, NIOSH is going to receive actually a slight budget increase during its tumultuous year. It's $366.8 million, about $4 million more than the previous fiscal year. And then MSHA is going to receive the Mine Safety and Health Administration is going to receive the same funding, which is $387.8 million. Kevin, what about you?
Briefly, just wanted to take things to the southern hemisphere, although in a minute I'll mention it really is a global discussion, but was watching the recent Australian Open tennis tournament and was intrigued to see signage for an organization called Safety Culture. It was very ubiquitous as you were watching on the ESPN networks, had most of the coverage, but it was adjacent to where the serve speeds were displayed along the baseline. Safety culture, safety culture, safety culture. And I'd repeat it, how many times have we all written or listened to seminars or just covered it? It's certainly an important concept in occupational safety. But it just got me wondering. I mean, these are trying times for my hometown St. Louis sports teams, the Cardinals and Blues, but really in recent years, I've taken more of an interest in the paddle and racket sports. So again, this was something that just had stuck out. So as we live in a world where you can just get on Google or any old search engine and you can find those things. So it just turns out that safety culture, in addition to a core principle that we cover and discuss, it's a global technology company it's a mobile-based operations platform, and from what I've read, it's grown by leaps and bounds. But it will get you really going with a safety inspection, a risk management, and training, all in the name, of course, of boosting workplace safety. But it kind of started out from humble beginnings, but now again, it's a mobile-based platform that does all these large-scale things that are so integral to safety culture. So it's headquartered in Australia, which makes sense for the Australian Open. It's in the state of New South Wales, but again, I just saw it and was curious. So next time I'm watching tennis, I'm sure I'll see it even more. But to wrap this all up and call it up to more current times, you couldn't mention Australia and occupational safety without Cam Stevens, who was very helpful in the aforementioned neurodiversity feature. Cam had lent his insights and expertise, and I know this story was a fair amount in the works, as you might read in the ed note by our editor, Melissa Rominsky. But Cam had been a little bit on the forefront of this, so appreciate him taking the time recently, but also kind of bringing this to our attention. Barry, how about you?
Well, Kevin, I'm going to bring us back to the Northern Hemisphere and specifically to the state of Kentucky. And the Kentucky House of Representatives recently passed a bill, and it is a workplace safety related bill, but kind of in a unique way. So the legislation is intended to clarify criminal trespass laws. And by doing that, they're hoping this expands worker safety. So what the representatives have done is the sponsors of this bill say this will expand the elements of the second-degree criminal trespass laws in the state to include knowingly entering or remaining in a workplace where notice against trespass is given. And the goal here is to protect workers from either disgruntled former employees or disgruntled customers. And one of the sponsors of the bill, who is Michael Meredith, said, "This bill simply tries to make our workplaces safer for employees and employers against the threat of folks who might be mad as disgruntled customers or disgruntled former employees." And now that bill will move to the Senate. It passed the House by an 83-7 vote, which was pretty overwhelming. And now that bill moves on to the next House.
Is there something you think we missed? Let us know at safehealth@nsc.org and check out news from around the safety world at safetyandhealthmagazine.com.
Thank you so much for joining us for this month's episode of On the Safe Side. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of it with us, wherever you choose to listen. Thanks again to our episode sponsor, Magid. You can check out our past episodes by going to safetyandhealthmagazine.com/podcasts. That includes episode 37 from March 2023, when Reginald Jackson, a safety and health specialist in OSHA's Office of General Industry and Agricultural Enforcement, joined us to discuss loading dock safety. The original music for this podcast was composed by Steve Maslin. Thank you so much, Steve. As always, we thank our NSC teammates behind the scenes who help make this podcast go. We'll be back next month to have more safety-related discussions, talk to trusted voices from around the profession, and hopefully make you smile a little. Until then, please stay on the safe side.